Hey there, so let's talk violence. What causes it? What motivates it? For the vast majority of us who will never in their lives kill another person, I think it's very, very hard for us to imagine how violence like that gets perpetrated. We struggle to make sense of tragedies. In our current culture, at least, most people seem to believe that the dominant driver of violence is sadists, moral monsters, evil people who commit crimes and hurt others for the pleasure of it. And this is especially true for the most heinous, horrific crimes. The psychologist Roy Baumeister referred to this belief as the myth of pure evil. Why is it a myth? Well, because it's probably not true. The sort of sadism that is perpetrated by psychopaths does exist, but it is pretty rare. Psychopaths do indeed lack empathy and moral emotions towards others. However, approximately only 10% of violent crimes is committed by people who score above the cutoff range for psychopathy. That still means that the vast majority of violent crime is still unexplained. Most of it is committed by normal people. What motivates these people to engage in violent behavior? At this moment, there are two dominant theories about what motivates violence in the general populace. The first one might be thought of as disinhibition, the disinhibition theory. This theory states that people have violent impulses, but they're usually kept in check by self-control. And when someone's self-control gets drained, then these violent impulses can come to the surface. Even in experiments that tried to drain test subjects of their self-control, it was found that aggressive actions were linked to a provocation of some sort, and hence a desire to get even. The other of the two theories behind motivations for violence, it might be thought of as the rational theory. That is to say, violence is rationalized as a means to an end. It is committed in the service of attaining some tangible goal. And there does indeed seem to be some empirical evidence supporting this theory. However, this doesn't account for instances in which non-violent means would serve to achieve a goal better than violent means, and yet people still carry out the violence anyway. Indeed, most violent crimes yield little financial gain. So then what does end up motivating most violence? Well, research done at UCLA analyzed many different accounts of many different kinds of violence. Murders, genocides, war, etc. And they did find a unifying theme, a plausible explanation for the motivations behind the violence that they analyzed. They found that holding constant across various cultures and historical periods, people's primary motivations for engaging in violence were moral ones. Now let me distinguish here between morality in the sense of what is actually right or wrong according to our best moral philosophers, our best moral reasoning, etc., and between people's moral sense, which is what people intuitively feel is right or wrong. The sort of moral circuitry in their brain that causes them to view an action as moral or immoral. People do not fail to realize that they're hurting other people. They fully realize that, but nonetheless they believe that they should. They believe that they have a moral obligation, a duty to punish others who have committed some sort of transgression against what they perceive as moral behavior. People are constantly moralizing about things. And in a situation where what is viewed as wrong isn't hurting another person, but let's say betraying a group or a coalition, engaging in some sort of impure sexual act, violating a social norm or taboo, if those are the things that are viewed as wrong, then it becomes quite easy to assume that you have a moral obligation, a moral duty to act and punish those people, sometimes in quite violent, extreme ways. And furthermore, due to the difficulty that people have in seeing things from other people's points of view, it's very easy to interpret someone who you think has morally transgressed as a mustache-twirling villain, as someone who is committing evil for evil's sake. It's very easy to think of them as a moral monster and hence deserving of any sort of punishment you can concoct. Whereas if you were to look at it from their point of view, they would believe that they are advancing human welfare, that they are acting right and just. This sort of moral sense really allows for atrocities to be excused for the greater good. So the primary motivators of violence seem to be people's moral sense. Let me define what I mean by moral sense as I'm using it here. People's moral sense might be thought of as having three facets. The first is that the disapproval of a moralized act is thought to be universal. It's the difference between enjoying Marmite and murder. One of those is clearly viewed as an immoral act. As the second thing is that moralized beliefs are actionable, which means that they are worth having in and of themselves. They are goals that must be aspired to. They're imperative simply because they are moral. And the third thing is that moralized infractions are punishable. Indeed, one is obligated to punish someone for violating a moral principle. So this moral sense, combined with the fact that we can so easily dehumanize those who don't fit under our moral model, means that people can excuse atrocities as being committed for the greater good. I'm sure with only little thought you can think of thousands of events where people excuse a violent action as being just or moral, due to a combination of the moral sense and dehumanization. Every example of an honor killing, every act of revenge in a gang war, are all examples of such moral reasoning. So in some sense, the problems in the world we see today aren't caused by a lack of morality, they're caused by far too much of it. Now, if this is the case, and most violence is motivated by people's moral intuitions, then what's the solution? How do we get out of it? Research seems to suggest that increasing the severity of a punishment seems to have little effect as a deterrent when it comes to moral violence. This is probably because people feel that their actions are right and justified, and that either the law will end up siding with them, or else that the punishments they will receive are worth it compared to selling out their moral sense. And furthermore, if violence isn't caused by a mistake on the part of the perpetrator, if it isn't caused by a breakdown in willpower, then exercises in training self-control won't really help either. So what is the best solution to this crisis? Well, if people's own ideas about right and wrong are what matter most to them, then we have to change what they think is right and wrong. Only when violence in any relationship is seen as a violation of every relationship can it be expected to diminish. To that end, educational programs that try and reframe how people think about violence and try to restructure their moral sentiments into seeing hurting somebody else as a greater problem than violating some social taboo seem to be effective. And as sort of an offshoot of that idea, being more utilitarian when it comes to our moral sense might help. Let me provide a couple brief examples of the sort of utilitarian reasoning I'm talking about. Let's say I live in a community where it is illegal to eat cake on a Monday. By the way, there are lots of obscure, strange laws like this that are still technically on the books in many states. They just aren't enforced. But more than that, let's say it was not just illegal, it is considered highly immoral, and the punishment for doing so is either extreme torture or death. Performing the moral calculus here gives us a very clear answer. Is it right for the community I live in to subject me to this horrible punishment when all I've done is eat a slice of cake? No. Regardless of the fact that their moral feelings are incensed, when we look at just the consequences of that action, it becomes clear that my actions of eating this slice of cake hurt no one. I mean, okay, maybe I'm hurting myself by eating something that isn't that great for me, but I'm making that choice about my body. I am not physically hurting any other person or depriving any other person of their rights. Another example, let's say a man cheats on his girlfriend, and in a fit of jealous rage, she beats him to within an inch of his life, or indeed kills him. Again, running the simple who is harmed calculation leads us to see that her actions were not justified. His cheating, while maybe a shitty thing to do, didn't really harm anyone. At least not physically. The woman in question might have received some emotional harm, but that's something you can overcome. Being murdered isn't really something you can overcome. It's not really something you can get past, as far as I know. If you guys know of any way of getting past being murdered, let me know, because I would like to know. So again, looking at it from a utilitarian standpoint, we see that her acting in revenge would just cause more harm. Her actions would not be justified. So yes, when we dispense with our moral intuitions and reason about something, and reason about the consequences of an action, we can act more morally and avoid committing unnecessary harm. I'm sure many of us know people from older generations who cannot conceive of the concept of being gay or gay marriage as being a neutral act. They think it is immoral and should be punished. To them, the argument that it isn't hurting anyone just doesn't make any sense. If we were to try and shift how people think about morality into simply who gets hurt and who flourishes, minimizing the amount of damage or hurt, and maximizing the amount of happiness and flourishing, that might go a long way to fixing the damage caused by the moral sense. Essentially, if we could be a little more utilitarian about human flourishing, and a little less, well, quick to moralize. We have to equip people with the tools to reason more effectively about morality if things are going to get any better. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.